Do you ever get ready to draft and you just know that there's going to be some guys that your friends are not going to be as high on? Well, today I'm bringing you 4 players that you should be higher on than your friends. First player that we're going to be talking about is going to be Achane for the Miami Dolphins. And starting with the Devon, right now in underdog leagues, he is still going pretty high. Going off the board as RB7 overall player 24 in underdog league. Now, he's going behind guys like Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, I don't think you should be taking Mr. Devon over a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs or over a guy like Jonathan Taylor. But what I will say is this ADP of the back end of the second round feels absolutely crazy for a guy who last year on a points per game basis, 17.3 fantasy points per game, was the RB5 overall in fantasy football. Now, he did only play in 11 games. He only did have 103 rushing attempts for 800 yards, 27 receptions for 197 yards, and 11 total touchdowns. So a lot of people are going to say, well, Caleb, he was so touchdown dependent. That is why I'm not drafting some Devon. Now, when we look at his fantasy points per opportunity, my man was the RB1, RB5 on the points per game basis, RB9 on total touchdowns per game. And like I said, the yards per touch, he was the RB1. When you look at these efficiency metrics, RB1 in breakaway run rate, RB6 in breakaway runs, RB2 in true yards per carry. My man was so efficient and so dominant as a rookie running back in the NFL. Now you're going to say to me, well, Caleb, not only do we have Devon, we also have Raheem Mostert, and they just drafted Jalen Wright, who you absolutely love as a late round sleeper. I do love some Jalen Wright as a late round sleeper, but when we're looking at these in and out splits last year with Devon when he was playing with Raheem Mostert and in the 2 games that he didn't have Raheem Mostert, we're talking about him being pretty similar. 18.4 when he was the solo main lead bell cow, and 17.3 when he was sharing the backfield. So for me, I still think the upside is there even in a backfield with 3 really good running backs. And so I really love Devon heading into 2024 fantasy football. I think your friends are going to be a little bit worried that he's not the primarily dominant ball carrier like a guy like a Saquon, like a guy like a Bijan, like a guy like a CMC. But we've never seen a dude put up these type of numbers before and have this sort of efficiency. And all of a sudden, we're going to just kind of attribute that to all the touchdown upside. Well, he's playing in a really great offense. So I still think all that touchdown upside is going to exist. But my thing is maybe Devon, maybe he doesn't play a full 16 games. But if he can give you maybe more than 11, maybe he can get into that 12 to 14 game mark this season, that's going to be absolutely incredible for you, and you need to have that game breaking upside on your fantasy football team. My second player your friends are really missing out on is Garrett Wilson. And the thing is with Garrett Wilson, the hype has been built over the last 2 years. Coming in as a rookie, high draft pedigree with that top 10 pick, really dominated as a rookie, but had Zach Wilson throwing in the ball with 147 targets in that rookie season, put up 12.7 fantasy points per game, was the wide receiver 30. Then we look at last year where he was supposed to have Aaron Rodgers as the savior, a better quarterback, just an average quarterback that could get him the ball. And what do we see? Aaron Rodgers comes out carrying the flag and then of course gets hurt. Puts up 12.5 fantasy points, wide receiver 32, but demands 168 targets. So he almost added 15 total targets in this overall offense. And we're looking at it from a perspective, he was the wide receiver 4 on a target share last year. Now, wide receiver 4 on a target share, but he was only able to put up, wide receiver 30 finishes over the last 2 seasons. Has a lot of your friends concerned that even if maybe Aaron Rodgers comes in, what's that overall upside for Garrett Wilson, a guy who in underdog leagues right now is going off the board as wide receiver 8. So you're having to take him in the top 8 wide receivers pretty much at the back end of the first round. For me, I am not concerned, and I think your league mates are really going to be missing out with Garrett Wilson. So if you take a look at this chart, you're going to see the in split with Zach Wilson and the out of split without Zach Wilson bumped up a total of 3 points per game without Zach Wilson. And we're talking about over the last 2 years, some of the backup quarterbacks that were backing up even like a Zach Wilson. We're talking about like a Mike White. Like, we're not talking about some elite level quarterback that just had as a backup quarterback to Zach Wilson. No. But we can see that he had more receptions. He had higher percent of receiving touchdowns. He even got more targets. Like, for me, it's pretty clear and simple that you add Aaron Rodgers into this offense, we're going to see Garrett Wilson absolutely explode. Because 168 targets, that is not shabby on an offense that also had a guy like Breece Hall, who was a dominant fantasy football player last year. So yes, am I super pumped for Breece Hall? Yes, but everyone knows that Breece Hall in an Aaron Rodgers-led offense is going to do amazing. I think people are really sleeping on the fact of how big and how amazing Garrett Wilson is going to be able to do to perform for your fantasy football team. So your friends are being dumb, pushing him down the board a little bit to the back end of the first. Trust me, let us take some Garrett Wilson. Take the value, draft him. Do not be scared of the lack of production that he's had the the last few seasons, I am all in on Garrett Wilson in 2024 fantasy football. My third player that I think your league mates, your friends, they're really missing out on is going to be Nico Collins. And Nico Collins not only signs the huge contract with the Houston Texans, but the Houston Texans bring in Stephon Diggs. And a lot of people are concerned, hey, who's going to be the alpha in this Houston Texans offense? Hey, well, follow the money and you're going to see that it is going to be Nico Collins, who last year was the wide receiver 7 on a points per game basis with 17.4 fantasy points per game. Now, he did have 8 receiving touchdowns, 16.2 yards per reception, 109 targets, and 80 receptions. And a lot of people in the fantasy space, they're like, hey, Nico Collins, he had an amazing year last year without CJ Stroud. If he's only going to get 109 targets this year, it's going to be really hard for him to replicate that on 80 total catches. I don't see how Nico Collins is going to be able to return the value that you have to spend on him in your underdog leagues when you're drafting Nico Collins as the wide receiver 14 overall player 20. So you're having to draft him, of course, in that back end of the second round. And for me, when I'm sitting here, I hear you. I like when we're looking at these Nico Collins splits with Tank Dell versus without Tank Dell, we can see that in the splits with Tank Dell, Nico Collins put up 18.21 fantasy points per game, and out of the split when he was playing by himself, he averaged 15.6 fantasy points per game. So I think the fact that people are worried about Tank Dell taking away from Nico Collins, I think is the furthest thing from the truth. Because as we can see, when they played together, it actually brought the best out of Nico Collins and didn't take away from him. Now, adding Stephon Diggs into this offense, we're going to have to take a little bit of a look at this overall target share that people are projecting. So when we head over here to the projection machine, we're going to see that Nico Collins is projected to get 135 targets, 94 receptions, 7 total receiving touchdowns. And if he did that, honestly, we're talking about him absolutely eclipsing the numbers that he did last season, and I think even providing better value. So I love CJ Stroud as a quarterback. I love this overall offense. I mean, we're talking about Stephon Diggs getting 123 targets. Now, I think Tank Dell is actually going to be the clear wide receiver 2 in this offense. I know a lot of people love Stephon Diggs. I'm going to have plenty of all 3 of them in my underdog leagues. I think Nico Collins, clear alpha level wide receiver. I think your friends are going to be a little bit scared to draft him in the second round. That second round gets real scary right now in any type of redraft format because there's a lot of unknown. But Nico Collins is a known. He's in an elite level offense. Let us not overthink it and take Nico Collins and let your friends, they're missing out on him. But you take Nico Collins and you enjoy the flavor that he is able to provide to your fantasy football team. And my fourth player that your friends are missing out on is going to be David Njoku. And David Njoku is really an interesting one because right now in underdog leagues, he's going at tight end 11, overall player 101. And so when you're talking about tight ends that are going ahead of him, you got guys like Brock Bowers, Jake Ferguson, Evan Ingram. And while all those guys have had elite level seasons, David Njoku emerged the last 2 seasons as tight end 8 on a points per game basis and tight end 7 on a points per game basis. So you're able to get him past kind of where he's landed the last 2 years. And that's assuming the fact that David Njoku had a great connection with Joe Flacco. I hear you. And so I know a lot of people are worried about Mr. Deshaun Watson running the overall offense for the Cleveland Browns. No need to fear. My man had 123 targets last year. Even if somehow my dude goes down to like 115, let's say he regresses to 115, 110 targets with Deshaun Watson, I don't think there's any reason for us to believe that David Njoku cannot be absolutely consistent. I mean, right now on RotoViz, they're projecting 105 targets, 71 receptions. So they are projecting him to be a little bit lower than where he was last season with Joe Flacco. But when we look at the in and out splits of in splits with Deshaun Watson and without a Deshaun Watson, this is where people start to get a little bit concerned because as we can see in the in split that David Njoku had 9.02 when he played with Deshaun Watson and 13 fantasy points without. So I hear that. Like I see this numbers in front of me and I'm still over here putting my money where my mouth is and saying that your league mates are still going to be overthinking it. They're going to be looking at these numbers. They're going to say, hey, David Njoku, what he did last year was all because of Joe Flacco. We don't need to overthink this. And I'm saying to you, Amari Cooper's getting another year older. We got Nick Chubb coming off of an ACL surgery. We got Jerome Ford, who we absolutely love. We talked about him in my video yesterday. Jerry Jeudy, who's kind of been a bust up to this point. We could talk about David Njoku being the clear number 2 receiving option in this Cleveland Browns offense, which I don't think is going to be bad. I understand there's been questions around Kevin Stefanski's play calling, but I don't think David Njoku is a bad pick, especially at tight end when you're taking him behind guys like a Brock Bowers, who I love some Brock Bowers, but he's a rookie tight end. We haven't seen it yet. Jake Ferguson, playing with Dak Prescott, kind of putting the ball before the horse. I mean, he had some explosion days, but David Njoku, I like that value right now, and I think your friends are going to be overthinking it with David Njoku, who's an ultra athletic tight end who is 27. He's entering into the prime of his tight end years, so I absolutely love some David Njoku. If you like fantasy football, hit the like and subscribe button. Putting out more content this week. We will be going live tomorrow night with Andrew from the league FFB doing an underdog draft at 7:30, so make sure you tune in tomorrow at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. Want to hang out with you, want to see you in the chat. Ask me any questions down below. Let me know which of these players you like, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.